Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And we are now going to be getting into our third segment of the day here on the show. Like I said, concluding our positional rankings, but starting off with our tight ends. Like I said before the break, I feel like the tight end position is getting a little bit more clear-cut week in, week out. We know who thrives in certain situations, and we know who has not risen to the occasion yet this season. However, I still want this to be a very versatile, volatile segment week in, week out, where there's an air of unpredictability to these players that I choose. So, on this list, I do have some players who I feel like have proven themselves as viable fantasy options at the tight end position. But there are some, even though there are only four, who I feel like you might not have on your radar. And it's all dependent, right, on how integral these tight ends are to their teams. Because that seems to be the story of the season for the position. How important are you to your team to that you're one of the main target men for your particular squad? And so that's what I'm trying to decipher when I make these lists. Without further ado, you have every right to be skeptical. You have every right to appreciate my list. Let's jump right into this list and get a little bit wacky and weird with the tight ends this week. Let's start off with one who is seemingly becoming chalk, though. A guy who, at the start of the season, really didn't look like he was going to be involved as much in the offense yet again, but has proven his mettle in a very much different, diverse scheme that seems tailored to him and what he can do for this offense. And that is Uber on graphic, Kyle Pitts going against the Cowboys. Now, why I like Kyle Pitts in this setup for Atlanta is because of the fact that Kirk Cousins at his best is going to pick apart different secondaries. And the way he does it is that he doesn't go long. He doesn't challenge the corners and safeties. He takes what he gets from the defense. He's very much thriving in short to intermediate areas of the field when he's at his best. And that's where Kyle Pitts makes his money. And so in this game, or in games against certain defenses where you feel like they're not going to load the box trying to pressure Kirk Cousins in the run game, you can definitely get a lot of production out of a guy like Kyle Pitts at the tight end position because he's physical. He can run right past you. You can really challenge your linebackers and corners, and he's not afraid to get physical to win. Excuse me. At the catch point, he's going to be aggressive, and he's going to challenge you on every single play. So look for him to continue the solid stretch of form for him. Last week, against the Tampa Bay Bucs defense, it's very similar to what the Cowboys are looking like right now. 25.1 fantasy points for him. So look for him to continue to exploit defenses that don't pressure Kirk Cousins. And for that connection to be one that comes in handy from a fantasy perspective. So this is perhaps the most chalk pick you're going to see in my rankings for this week. Now we're going to get a little bit crazy because this next tight end is more so in a team that needs him rather than someone who you rely upon week in, week out. So this one certainly feels like one more so for a fantasy football manager willing to eschew a certain aesthetic of, I need a superstar tight end. Because you're not always going to get superstar tight ends. So you're going to have to look between the margins at certain points. And this guy is between the margins that they get and potentially in a lower tier than, say, a guy who is looking at a fringe spot on your team. And that is Noah Fant. He's going up against a Rams defense that was going to, as always, try and put pressure on this very weak Seattle O-line. And much like what Kyle Pitts can do for Atlanta, Noah Fant can do for Seattle. He's always kind of like the security blanket player. The past couple of years in this Seattle offense, he has proven to be someone that is vital to their success moving the football, no matter who was the OC, whether it be Waldron, whether it be Grubb right now. Noah Fant's going to be a versatile piece of this offense. He may not always get the football first in certain situations. It cannot always be the first look for Geno. But in certain moments, say in third and longs, third and manageables, they roll Geno out. Noah Fant's a huge part of what they do in play action. And look for either one of these Seattle tight ends. I really liked Barner as well to step up against a pass rush that's hungry for more success after perhaps his best performance of the season last week against Minnesota. So look for Noah Fant to try and neutralize those blitzing linebackers, that active front, and really prove his mettle as someone who can be a force to be reckoned with week in, week out in fantasy. Now, let's get back to kind of more chalk. Not necessarily chalk in the sense that this was a guy who everyone was expecting at this point in the season to be one of the best, but someone who's really come into his own when the odds are stacked against him and his team, and someone who can continue to do so at a very effective level should injury concerns carry over for this team and lead to more missed time for top weapons for them. So Cade Otton, week in, week out, becomes ever more important to what this team does on the offensive side of the football. And not for nothing, this is going to be a very tough matchup for the Bucs, and there's going to have a lot of them coming up. The Chiefs don't allow much, whether it be the run game, whether it be the pass game. They just don't allow much in general. This is a very stingy unit, perhaps the best unit in the entire NFL. And they are the reason why the Chiefs are unbeaten right now. But as far-fetched as it may seem, the Bucs can stay in this one, just because the fact when you look at how this offense sets up, when you look at what Liam Cohen can do to alleviate the burden on some of these players in terms of the outlook of this team without its stars. I feel like Cade Otton can do a lot of the same things Evans and Godwin were doing, and at an even better scale, even more important scale, because at this moment, if you're the Bucs, you can't panic going forward, because then these teams you're going to play in this difficult stretch will spell blood. And so having a guy like Cade Otton means a lot, because he may not be like this elite tight end. He may not be a top 10 guy, but he's someone that can move the ball for you, someone that's comfortable in this offense, and most importantly, someone who Baker trusts even outside of his top guys. So look for Cade Otton to continue making an impact as he always can, because last week he had 29.1 fantasy points versus Atlanta. That's a ridiculous stat for a tight end. Yes, it's a tougher test, but this test is all about, that rapport, that chemistry this Bucs offense is built from top to bottom, and not just within the Chris Godwin and Mike Evans narrative. So look for Cade Otton to continue performing at a very high level for this team. And the last guy that I want to talk about is another guy who you wouldn't anticipate making fantasy football pundits lists. A guy who I was actually impressed with 2 weeks ago as one of Justin Herbert's premier targets in that game against Arizona, but in many ways is someone who can pretend to be frustrating in certain moments in certain games. And so this is one of those guys who I'm kind of nervous about, putting out there on this kind of scale as someone who I feel could start for you this week in fantasy. But I still feel like he warrants attention just because of the outlook of the Chargers offense. Most importantly, how week in, week out, this Chargers offense can develop and grow. And so that's why Will Dissly is always going to be someone who intrigues me. Now, let's go back to that game against Arizona, where I feel like the Chargers did a great job in utilizing a guy like Will Dissly. Will Dissly wasn't doing anything fancy. He was just getting as open as possible on certain routes and really trying to find the soft spots in that Arizona defense. Yes, it didn't equate to any points for his offense, but tight ends who can always exploit the soft spots, whether it be in zone or man, are always going to be vital to their team and to fantasy football managers everywhere, because of the fact that you know, he may not always be the top target when he's finding these soft spots, but he's still making himself available, making others look better, most importantly, trying to do what is best for his team in certain situations. He's a highly situational guy. He can get it going in the red zone. He can get it going on third and longs, third and manageables. And so that is why his value this season, excuse me, I don't know why I'm yawning so much, stems from success of the Chargers offense as a whole. Because if this Chargers offense really is more of a run-heavy mindset right now, then, the importance of a guy like Will Dissly becomes much more prescient, much more prevalent in how they will play going forward. So if you can get the run game going, chances are that physicality can translate into how your tight end plays. Because the running back and tight end are intrinsically linked in certain teams to where if the running back performs at a high level, so too can the tight end, because you're opening up certain gaps, keeping defenses on their toes, and also learning to understand your role. And I feel like Will Dissly is understanding that to a T. This veteran of the game is proving that, you don't necessarily have to put up lofty numbers to be respected in the game and respected in terms of this Chargers offense, because he is the X factor for them. If things go awry, who knows? Maybe we'll have to maintain a bigger receiving role in this offense. But until that time, I feel like Will Dissly is someone who will always be effective, no matter how this Chargers offense looks or plans to look going forward, just because of the matchup. And this matchup is an interesting one between him and the Browns, but I feel like, the Browns are a team that can be exploited if, their corners and safeties get caught in an island and Will Dissly's all alone in the middle of the field. So look for him to exploit what the Browns do in terms of their aggressive man-to-man coverage and prove his mettle as someone who could rise quickly in the tight end ranks. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, because the tight end position, I feel like, is becoming a little bit easier to diagnose, but still has room for interesting players to seep their way through the cracks, like a guy like Will Dissly, like a guy like Noah Fant, like a guy like Kate Otten, who, even though I felt like could potentially be a breakout candidate for Tampa, truly now has to be, and is proving to be really quickly. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. But coming up on the other side, we officially conclude our positional rankings for Week 9 of the NFL season with the defense and special teams units that I think will best define fantasy football this particular weekend. You don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break.